I'm live. My head is hunting me and my heart feels like a ghost. I need to feel something 'cause I'm still so far from home. Cross my heart and hope to die. Promise you I'll never leave your side. You know what? I gotta bring up this chat. Show me what I can see. You've got me on my knees, I'm your undercoat. Cross my heart and hope to die. I swear I'll be leaving by your side. 'Cause I'm telling you, you're all I need. I promise you, you're all I see. 'Cause I'm telling you, you're all I need. I'll never leave. So you can drag me through hell. I gotta set this up right so I can see. Oh, hello. How are you? I'm live now. I just went live. I'm trying to wait for a couple minutes for people to get here. If they are, if not, whatever. I'll do your chart. But we are going to talk a little bit about Mars and Saturn's synodic cycle. And I want to wait till some people get here before I talk about synodic cycles. Because they're so synodic. I hope you're well, Splatter Cookie. I hope you are well. Oh, thank you for calling me gorgeous. You're so sweet. I appreciate it. I just got ready a second ago, and, my hair's still all wacky, and I didn't get to put on lipstick or stuff, just some eyeliner. Oh my gosh. There's so much going on right now. I always say that. I think I'm going to start every single one of these by saying there's a lot going on, because there is. How come I can't see who's here? How come I can't see who's here? See, I have this whole, I got this software for free, You need to learn how to interpret transits. We'll have to do a whole talk about transits and interpreting transits. That would be a fun one. And aspects, because you can't really do transits without aspects. Oh, thank you. I don't smile very often, I just keep seeing my nose. It's like, oh. But that doesn't matter. Like I was saying, there's so much going on, I wanted to talk about the synodic cycle thing because we have a trine. Hello, Katrina. We have a trine in a couple of days between Mars and Saturn on the 30th. Today is the 27th. Oh, goodness gracious. I was hoping some other people would come. But oh well. Oh well, oh well. Good evening, Bill. Bill, how you been? Why can't I see who's here? Why can't I see? Oh, it's 4 people. That's something. I'll take it. But why can't I see how many people in the chat? Oh well. Oh well. So you can drag me through hell. If it meant I could hold your hand, I will follow you. I love Ollie Sykes so much. It's funny to me about this whole, well, I guess it's interesting about the synodic cycle thing too, but what's really interesting to me about this whole Saturn and Pisces business, and again, I can't get too political because this is YouTube and I'll get in trouble, but, Donald Trump just held his campaign rally in Waco, Texas, right? And we're in the midst right now of the anniversary of the Waco siege. For those of you who don't know or don't remember, in 1993, there was this cult called the Branch Davidians, and they were hoarding weapons in a compound down in Waco, Texas. And of course, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the ATF, was not enthusiastic about that. And so there was a big standoff. There was a shootout that happened, I believe, when was that? Excuse me, at the very end of February of 1993, and it lasted till April 19th. Now, Saturn was in Aquarius then, but Saturn was about to go into Pisces. And it's quite interesting that that happened because that became the motivating event for lots and lots of other wackiness later. For example, the Oklahoma City bombing, Oklahoma City Federal Building bombing, in 1995, I think that was 1995, perpetrated by, I think it was Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols. And again, it was motivated by, it was the rise of the militia movement. It was motivated by hatred, essentially. So we'll see a lot of those themes through all this. But it was just interesting to me that during the anniversary, what is this? That was 1993 and it's 2023. So, oh my gosh, is that the 30-year anniversary? It's the 30-year anniversary. Almost a Saturn cycle, right? Like, isn't that interesting? It's a Saturn cycle. 29 years, basically, a little bit more, So that's pretty wild. When Saturn went into Pisces, and Saturn just went into Pisces recently, back in March. So you kind of see how these cycles repeat themselves, it's kind of wild. Is anyone else coming? Ooh, we got a fifth person. You know what? I'll stop looking at the numbers and I'll just talk. It really doesn't matter, because I'm still in the process of building all this stuff up. I'm way better talking than I am writing. Writing just gets so tedious. I'm better with speaking. Didn't put on any lipstick. I look like a corpse. Oh my gosh, I look like I should be in a morgue. In one of the freezer boxes in the hospital. I keep kicking my desk. My knees, I have frosty knees. So anyway, we should probably break into the Synodic cycle because anyone else who wants to come will come. If you build, they will come. I have to be careful. I took lots of notes. I'm like that kid who prepares for the test right before class. I mean, I was back then, but I still am because I was working on this outline today. I mean, most of the day. And I just sort of finished it right before going live, which is why I had no time to put on makeup. And I just sort of smeared it all on like a tart, to use a UK phrase, because I don't want to get in trouble. I think I can say tart, right? I think I can say tart and not get in trouble. So anyway, what, pray tell, is a synodic cycle? Well, you're familiar with synodic cycles already. What's an example of a synodic cycle you're familiar with? Well, probably moon phases. Moon phases are a synodic cycle. Okay, so what's a synodic cycle? Well, it's the duration or the time it takes for a planet to return to its same position relative to another planet. So the moon phases are an example of that, right? It's a synodic cycle between the sun and the moon. Oh my gosh, I should have put up a picture. You know what? I'll bring up a picture really quick of it's a wonderful diagram I did way back in the day I meant to have it up. I really did mean to have it up. I'll put it up I'll bring it from Facebook, Facebook. But it's a cool graphic because you can eyeball your moon phase just based on, the approximate aspect that the sun and moon are making to each other. For example, a trine is like a gibbous moon, but we'll get into all that stuff. I just want to find this fun. Frankie moon phase. That would have been a good name. Frankie moon phase. Here we go. This is my little moon phase diagram. So this is sort of a basic rubric for a synodic cycle. We can think of it like we do the moon phases. And these are approximate. But we say mostly, and these are the general guidelines, but nothing is like an on and off switch. It's not like, oh, you're at 45 degrees, that's the crescent. It's not, more or less, we look at these phases shift over time, over the course of a month. So we say the crescent is about 45 degrees. 0 to 45 degrees is a new moon, right? This is the new moon phase, even though we start to see it kind of gradually come on before that, right? And then the crescent phase here. Oh, wait, do you need to see this more? Can you see it? Can you see it properly? There we go. I don't want you to see my naughty stuff. Oops. I don't want you to see my naughty stuff. Because I do naughty work as well. I don't want to have to talk about that on here. Although I would like to advertise, but I don't want to get in trouble. Again. I say again because I had one little warning, from YouTube for mentioning my other work before. Anyway, so from 45 to 90 degrees, we more or less call the crescent phase. Right? And then from 90 degrees to 135, we call the gibbous phase. I got ahead of myself. We call the first quarter, right? And then the 135 to 180 is the gibbous phase. And this is what's called the waxing cycle, where the moon is increasing in light, right? And then we have 180 degrees, which is the full moon, right? The lunations, or what we call syzygies. They are syzygies because there's an alignment, right? And that's what a syzygy is. And we'll do a whole nother discussion on syzygies and the prenatal lunation in your birth chart because that's really important. And you'll see it really prominent in the lives of famous people. And you'll also see some unfortunate syzygies with people who, meet untimely demises and things like that. But that's a whole nother discussion. The disseminating moon and all these other ones are on the waning cycle, when the moon is decreasing in light, right? There was a wonderful poem. I can't remember her name right now, but it was very simple. It was, "O Lady Moon, your horns point towards the east, shine, be increased. O Lady Moon, your horns point towards the west, wane, be at rest." So, when you see the light part of the moon sort of facing the east, or rather the horns, it looks, when you see sort of the crescent thing. It doesn't really work when you're in the gibbous phase because it doesn't really have horns, does it? So anyway, disseminating, like we said, 180 to 135, behind the sun. These are all in front of the sun, right? This is behind the sun in terms of the zodiac, right? And then we have 90 degrees last quarter, balsamic, 45 degrees. And balsamic just means dark, right? That's why we have balsamic vinegar and balsamic dressing, They're darker colored. Anyway, back to the chart here. Although this chart really isn't all that relevant right now. So anyway, in terms of the synodic cycle between Mars and Saturn, we see a lot of interesting things. So the synodic cycle between Mars and Saturn, it's the time, I'm considering it the time in between Mars-Saturn conjunctions. Each one of those represents a cycle. You can look at the synodic cycle of any of the planets and come to interesting conclusions about things. I just thought this was particularly interesting because on the 30th, like I said, we're going to have a waxing trine. So here's March 30th, right? And where is Saturn? Here we go, 2 degrees of Pisces. And here we have Mars at 2 degrees of Cancer. So we see that they're making a trine. We have a trine perfected here, I mean, within minutes, right? And we see that Mars is in front of Saturn. So we can consider that sort of like the waxing cycle, as if we were considering Saturn to be in the position of the sun and Mars to sort of be in the position of the moon. You see? So anyway, so we could call this, even though there's no light really that we see being distributed like we do with the sun and the moon with the lunar phases, it's still quite interesting because planets do emit light. So when a planet is combust, its light is eclipsed by the sun. And the whole thing too about aspects, the word aspect comes from Latin, aspicere, I think I'm saying that right, which means to look at or behold. And so the theory behind aspects is that planets were casting gazes at each other or looking at each other, right? I got to keep looking at the camera every so often, so I'm giving you the eye. Your eyes and your soul. So, and every once in a while I have to look back at charts and notes and things like that. So, bear with me. I'm not avoiding you. Don't worry, I'm not avoiding you. So anyway, synodic cycles. So there were a couple I wanted to focus on. Well, before we get to that though, let's go back to this fun little moon chart. Where did you go, fun little moon chart? There you are, fun little moon chart. So just a little bit about the synodic cycles. I was coming up, Dane Rudyard sort of likened each of these moon phases to the life cycle of a plant. And we kind of think of the waxing cycle as the growth, right? Sort of the optimistic, the light is increasing. And then the waning cycle is the light decreasing. So it's sort of like, it is the waning of energy. It's the reflecting part. It's where we reflect on what has happened, what has transpired. It's almost like a critical phase. Yeah? So you'll see evaluations, you'll see critiques, you'll see, people with people with waning moons tend to be more introspective, right? And they tend to be more critical. So, especially the disseminating moon, because it's the one just immediately departing, right? But this is also a trine, what we could call a waning trine. So what I did here is I sort of divided up the Mars-Saturn synodic cycle into a couple basic parts. I didn't worry so much about, this crescent phase or balsamic phase so much. I focused on the conjunctions and the oppositions, sort of like a new Mars and a full Mars, right? If we want to think of it like that. And then, so we go from that to the first quarter, this is like a waxing square. And the last quarter is like a waning square. So we'll see, energy and events that are more or less consistent with the energy of a square, but they change character based on waxing and waning. And we'll look at a couple of events here and there because I focused on several synodic cycles, a couple recent ones and one a little bit older. Me right now, I'm so focused on the 1930s because of wacky transits we're having and lots of parallels that, are very hard to ignore. So, I gotta stop saying so. So, a needle pulling thread, far a long, long way to run. Anyway. Tea, a drink with something bread. A drink with jam and bread. I can't remember. I love the sound of music though. Edelweiss. Anyway, whole nother thing. I got my trusty 8-ball too. You can tell I have ADHD, but I try and always bring it back. I try and circle back here. So, I just noticed on the screen you can't see some of this other stuff here. So you see the disseminating over there. Oops. And you see the last quarter and you see the balsamic. There you go. Anyway. So I just wanted to talk about some of that stuff because what I think of when I see the waxing crest or the waxing square, this first quarter, if you will, it's opposition, it's difficulty, it's the issues, problems manifesting. You know, the new moon phase, the conjunction, is sort of like the beginning. It's things emerging, things coming to light, even though it's dark. You know, it's the start of the cycle. And so we'll see decided breaks with the past in certain ways, and we'll see new emphases focusing on a new cycle at the same time. Now, so then the first quarter is the square, building things up and facing opposition. The gibbous is the trine. So whereas the issues and the obstacles emerge at the first quarter, we start to brainstorm solutions, or we start to look ahead. Sometimes it's an optimistic phase. Sometimes we're in the midst of a crisis. Like one of the cycles, our last one, oh, please don't. God, how do I silence people? Ugh. Anyway, I probably should get rid of this. Let me save it. Open image in a new tab. There we go. So I could close the other nonsense. I don't care what people have to say. I mean, I do care what you have to say, just not other people right now, you know? But I do care what you have to say. In fact, I should look at what you're saying right now and see if anyone is saying anything. People will watch later. Oh, Denise Christiansen, my Norwegian friend. Well, I don't know if you're Norwegian, but I just always assume. Hector, hello, my darling. You love my videos. Greetings from Mexico. I love Mexico. I don't know if you're a fan of Lopez Obrador, but you know, I was very excited about him in the beginning, at least. And I'm glad we have. I mean, my stepmom was from Mexico, actually, growing up. I used to speak really good Spanish, you know, but I just didn't keep up with it enough. I know, I don't mean to sound any which way, but I worked in restaurants for 15 years, you know. And you know, I got to practice Spanish quite a bit, but it was kitchen Spanish, you know. And so we didn't speak about astrology or esoteric things, you know. Oh, yes, on your dad's side, Denise, with the Norwegian, yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here, Hector. So, I'm so glad you're here. Anyone else? We had friends from Colombia last time. And from Chile. Where's all of our South American friends? Well, anyway, I'm sure they'll come later. But I just wanted to talk about some of these phases. The opposition here is when things really manifest, right? That's the full moon. Then the disseminating is the waning trine. So it can be an optimistic time. It can also be bewildering because we can have this sort of unfounded optimism. You know, we can be having a certain vision, or, you know, we're looking behind oftentimes and coming up with a critique, you know. Well, how did this go? How did that go? The last quarter represents, you know, the opposition we face as we look ahead. We're starting to depart. We're leaving behind the things that we achieved at the full moon and starting bit by bit as we approach the balsamic, you know, to turn away from the critique. The disseminating is the primary phase for the critique. You know, we start to implement the things that we did, hopefully what we learned, if we learned anything at all. And then the last quarter is is that opposition as we start to turn away and cultivate a new vision. So anyway, look ahead to the next cycle, perhaps. It's more about departing. It's leaving things behind, right? Whereas on the waxing cycle, we're looking ahead. So what are some key words here that we were thinking about when it came to Saturn and Mars? Well, I wrote down some words about Mars. Disease. Mars did have to do with disease in ancient times. Sickness, viruses. I mean, people weren't aware in ancient times of things like germs, right? Or bacteria or viruses. But Mars came to represent disease. Mars is also violence. We know that. He's the god of war. He's the god of conflict and causing trouble and things like that. Mars also has to do with what we call excise or removal. Mars cuts things off. It's, Mars rules surgery and blood, all that sort of stuff. Right? Removal. Now, Saturn, how about Saturn? And I'm mentioning some of these words. There's some loaded words here. Like, you're going to see why I mentioned disease with Mars. And Saturn rules lead, which I thought was interesting because, and we'll see that in a little bit, why I think that's interesting, Saturn ruling lead. But Saturn also represents restrictions, regulations, boundaries, confinement, prison, exile, right? Being exiled from one's home. Sorry, it's the stupid lime water. I really, really enjoy it. So the synodic cycles of Mars and Saturn that I want to focus on are the most recent one, right? Which was March 31st of 2020 to April 4th of 2022. The second one was the one previous to that, and that was it was April 1st of 2018 to March 31st of 2020, right? So, and we'll see some interesting things with that. Now, why I mentioned lead is I did highlight another synodic cycle that started in August of 2016 and continued till April of 2018. And then the final one I want to focus on, an old one, and we won't spend a lot of time on the 2016 one. I just want to mention it because it had a lot to do with the Flint water crisis. And again, Saturn rules lead, and that was one of the big contaminants of the water. What were the other contaminants? Viruses and bacteria, ruled by Mars. Legionnaire's disease, fecal bacteria. I mean, disgusting, terrible things, right? So I feel like I'm balding. God, I shouldn't be able to, look. Oh, I mean, part of it's Aquarius rising and Saturn ruled and stuff, but receding hairlines. Thank goodness my new GP. She's a trans care doctor, and she said, she recommended Propecia because it was an androgen blocker, for blocking testosterone. But the side effect of that is hair regrowth. So I'm like, maybe we should prescribe that to me, So I'd rather be somewhat self-effacing than start crying, like, oh my God, my hair. I'll still cry about it, but I'd rather make fun of it too. So, cross your heart and hope to die. I swear I'll be leaving by your side. 'Cause you can drag me through hell. If it meant I could hold your hand. And the final synodic cycle I want to look at briefly. It started in January 1934, and it went to January of 1936. And of course, as you can imagine, it has to do with Nazis, because I'm really focused on that stuff. But it's not all terrible. I'm trying to be more of a positive person because there's always wonderful stuff going on, and people can't ever lose hope, right? They have to. We have to continue to see a vision of what's possible for the future. Muhammad Ali, one of my favorite examples, he had a sixth house sun. And one thing about sixth house suns is they often face tremendous odds and tremendous opposition. Muhammad Ali was a wonderful prize fighter, renowned for his boxing skill. But then he chose another opponent, the United States government. He was protesting the Vietnam War, and he was never going to defeat the government, but it was a fight worth having. It was a fight worth fighting. And he may not have stopped the Vietnam War, but he sure drew attention to it. So it's worth looking at these things, and it's worth calling attention to them. Because even when we face tremendous opposition, there's so much we can do. And life is really, well, if you're interested in spiritual work, it's about service. And service is not always nice. Service entails, most of the time, defending the weak, the oppressed, the vulnerable. So anyway, well, let's start here with March 31st, 2020 till April 4th, 2022, right? Well, the COVID pandemic. I mean, that's the obvious thing, March 2020, right? Where were you, March 2020? It's so funny because I had a partner or girlfriend at the time visiting me, and we went to Universal Studios in March of 2020. And it's like, oh my God, no one's here. This is so cool. I wonder why. You know, there was a little bit in the news about a pandemic, but the gravity of the situation was not apparent yet. So in March, and this is of course the end of March, but we know that the lockdown started in March. I mean, especially in California, where I'm from, you know. The pandemic itself was announced in March. And then we had the CARES Act in March, right? Which was supposed to support a lot of us with, you know, who couldn't go to work and you know, helping us keep the economy afloat because there was a crash, right? And I've been advertising this forever, but we're going to do another video about economic crises and the astrology of them because that's very important too. And we have some interesting events coming up. My sources say no. Well, if only you knew what question I was asking, then that would be more interesting. But I'm not going to tell you. I didn't really ask a question. I was just shaking it. So anyway. So a needle pulling thread, far a long, long way to run. The CARES Act, right? That was a positive thing, and that kept a lot of us going. Now, also at the end of March, Anthony Fauci announced that there was going to be mass casualties. They said up to 240,000. It was a lot more than that, wasn't it? So, I have to look at the exact numbers. But then we had travel restrictions, right? Now, again, as I was saying, Mars rules disease. So we saw this disease happen, and then lockdowns. How Saturnian. Restrictions, right? Restrictions regarding disease. There were travel restrictions. That's exile. A lot of people couldn't return to the United States in the beginning, could they? A lot of people couldn't return to their countries of origin from the United States right away. So again, exile, a sense of exile or being, I'm still so far from home, cross my heart and hope to die. Right, I was singing Bring Me the Horizon, so, you know, still so far from home, which is a very Saturnian thing, you know, being so far from home. Why is my face like always? I think it's just because I'm like, ah. So eventually I'll stop paying attention to the person in the mirror, like Michael Jackson. I'm not going to sing that song right now. I'm looking back at a girl in the mirror. I am hoping she will change her ways. So anyway, well, what happened with the next phases? The waxing square. Well, and what I called the waxing square, manifestations. Oppositions, even though it's not an opposition aspect wise, oppositions appear. The struggles appear, right? And so during that waxing square, the death toll exceeded what Anthony Fauci said it would be. So it hit 400,000, which was, we're pushing almost twice as much as they forecasted. So things got real. That's another word that I use for the waxing square is it gets real, right? The reality of all this started to set in. Now, during the waxing trine, oftentimes there's a little bit of optimism. We look forward, right, to try and solve things or come up with solutions. And actually, around that, Biden signed the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, which did give cash payments to folks, but it expanded unemployment insurance and unemployment payments. It expanded the rental assistance program and then the child tax credit, which actually cut child poverty in half during that time, which is amazing. And it's sort of a shame they let it expire. In fact, I would even venture to say it's kind of sick they let it expire. So, but that's just me. And I'm trying not to get political. I'm just trying to drink my lime water. I'm just enjoying my lime water. I'm not getting political. So, but what happened? Oh, what else happened here with this? It's a gibbous phase for Mars, right? Mars is gibbous Mars here relative to Saturn, right? Everything's relative. Everything exists dependent on other things. And that's a video for another time too. So anyway, March 18th, during this gibbous phase, this optimistic-ish phase, the United States decides to share tons of unused vaccine doses with Mexico and Canada. So that was very swell. That's sort of optimistic, helping other countries, especially in our area where there's a lot of, back and forth. So it's all North America, isn't it? And we're very used to travel all up and down North America, especially when it comes to the economy. Excuse me, it's the lime water. I'm so sorry. It's very unprofessional. Oh, and then later in March of that year, around the same time, they were expanding funding for testing, immunization, and public health needs. Right? So that's all sort of optimistic stuff because we're looking at solutions for the crisis and whatnot. But then the opposition happens. This is where I say that persistent, or what we could call protracted, over a longer period of time, because Saturn stretches things out. Mars is quick, cutting things off. This all came on quick. But Saturn makes things drag on, right? So that's why I say sort of the underlying tensions become obvious or visible. And then I said underlying tensions. I totally lost my train of thought. Underlying tensions, but there was another phrase that I was using too. The protracted or the persistent issues that either we avoid or sort of lay under the surface. Now, one of these persistent issues that we were avoiding and that did sort of exist under the surface was that other health issues were being neglected, especially cancer. Poor cancer patients were being denied drugs. There were shortages of cancer drugs all over the place, right? And this didn't become obvious until we were at least a year, maybe more into the pandemic. So this opposition was around July 2021. And then it became obvious that the vaccine rates were affecting the COVID infection rate. Fancy that. Wow, big surprise. Right? So the lowest vaccination rate states were Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas. And they had infection rates 3 times as high as the more vaccinated states, like Vermont. Vermont was sort of leading the charge. I mean, they're pretty small. It's not. We don't want to denigrate Vermont, of course. Like Bernie Sanders, that's the great state of Vermont. The 1% need to pay their fair share. Elect me. Right? Bernie. That's a bad Bernie impression, but you feel me? So anyway, so those were persistent issues that became obvious through that opposition phase. There are plenty of other things, but I just picked several from each phase, you see? How about the waning trine? Like I said, it's the critical time. It's the critique. It's the reflection. Well, how did we do? It can be sort of addressing the issues. Oh, people are talking. I love when you talk. And then I will go back to whatever I was saying. Oh, no, people are not. Oh, are they? Hermosa, me encanta. Muchas gracias por los comentarios. I need to work on my Spanish. I'm terrible. But thank you so much for calling me hermosa. And for saying that you love me. And thank you, too, for following. And I try to make good commentaries. I try and make it interesting. Everyone does react videos. Maybe I should do a couple react. I'm like, should I do a react video to the astrology podcast sometime? I don't know if anyone does react videos in astrology. But that would probably be kind of fun. Oh, you love seeing my face multiple times in a week? I'm trying to go live 3 times a week. What I noticed, though, is I really need to work on my outlines and my notes. Otherwise, I go into Gemini oblivion. Oh, thank you for telling me I'm very beautiful. I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. I feel gross right now. I really do. I feel gross right now. I should have put on lipstick and my earrings and stuff. It's just my stupid hair, It feels like it's disappearing. It's okay, I'll get wigs or whatever someday, if I have to. Or I'll look like Ripley from Alien, right? Or Aliens, or all those movies. When Sigourney Weaver shaved her head. Or maybe Britney Spears when she shaved her head. Although I probably look a little bit more wacky like Britney Spears than I do, tough like Sigourney Weaver. I'll probably be more like that chick carrying an umbrella. Like, right? So anyway, but back to the synodic cycle here. And I'll try and carry it along so we can get to your charts. Because I know everyone wants their charts. Their charts. Oh, stop it, gorgeous all the time. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I gotta do reactions. Geminis are great at reacting to things, especially Gemini Mars. And Mars combust. Oh, believe me, do I react. Just question anything that I say or do, and I will react because, I have a problem with that sort of thing. When they asked us in elementary school what we wanted to be when we grew up, everyone's like, oh, a fireman, a policeman, or a doctor. And I'm like, I want to be dictator of the world. Like, what kind of Pluto nonsense is that? I have Pluto square my ascendant, I think I was like 9 or 10. Anyway, so then we moved on to the waning trine, like I was talking about. And this is where we're addressing issues, as I sort of indicated before. Try a wig before the cat. I think you'd rock it. Oh, yeah, for sure. I would. Plus I hate my natural hair. It's frizzy. It's Aquarius rising. I always wanted straight black hair. Like, when I was growing up, it was Cher. But then I was a Marilyn Manson fan growing up, even though he's not a nice person to women, as we know now. But I always wanted that straight black hair, like Cher. Do you believe in love after love? I like the old Cher better. The new Cher was better than the new Madonna, though. Like, let's be clear about that. You're always here for commentary and chart secondary. Well, thank you. That's very sweet. I know, and I'm going to plan more future lives, like I have to come up with the notes and have a format and a structure. Otherwise, I go off into Gemini oblivion. So the waning trine, where we address the issues, massive protests erupted in Brazil, right? Over Bolsonaro's handling of the COVID crisis. That was, people are like, enough is enough. There were Brazilian whistleblowers that revealed a hospital chain was lying about their COVID numbers and hiding the amount of deaths they were having. So again, whistleblower, this is bringing things up. It's addressing the issues, right? Travel restrictions between the United States and its European allies eased up, right? So people could travel once again and not have to, worry so much. That this was September, November of 2021. Then we hit the waning square. So this is where the underlying tensions manifest these new issues that we didn't sort of address. So some of these issues that fell by the wayside were, 22 million infants missed their first dose of the measles vaccine. That's pretty wild. It was the largest global increase in unvaccinated children in 20 years. So that's a pretty significant thing. So it's an unforeseen circumstance or issue that came as a result, right? So last quarter, we could think about that as well. The unforeseen obstacles that are sort of manifesting from the issue that we were addressing in the waxing cycle. And Omicron. The Omicron strain was first identified in South Africa. And the CDC tried to prepare, right, recommending vaccines for it. And I'm not pushing anything any which way. I'm just addressing the astrology and the events that correlate with it. And you can argue with me all you want about what events correlate and don't correlate. And we can have a very substantial discussion, but I will probably win. Either that or I will just discount whatever you're saying. I'm joking. If you can change my mind, and, I've had friends who've really changed my mind over the years. When I really get faced with some real information, I have an existential crisis and usually change my whole worldview. So anyway, we talked about Omicron. Here's the conjunction once again. The end of the cycle. April of 2022. April 4th. It's right around my brother's birthday. That's so interesting. But what happened? Well, global cases of COVID declined by nearly 25%, by nearly a quarter. Right? It wasn't the end of the crisis. It wasn't a solution, but it definitely wrapped up a big part of that cycle. You have a lot of brand new makeup planning to donate. Oh, you're so sweet. It's a lot of shadow palettes, mascara, lip products in their boxes never used. Would I like any of it? Do I have a P.O. box? I do not have a P.O. box. We could probably arrange that between us in private messages or something, or you know what? I will put my email in the chat because this is also my work email for getting clients or for having client messages. It's frankielynch777@gmail.com. I gotta start I love getting donations, obviously, because I'm trying to make all this stuff work. So please consider giving to my Patreon, or I'm gonna put my PayPal, Venmo and Cash App stuff, or because there have been very, very sweet people who've helped out with that. But moving right along here, it was, like I said, it wasn't the end. We still have. I got COVID right after that. I got COVID in May of 2021. Was it? Yeah, 2022. May of 2022. May of last year. And I got it really bad. I was sick for 10 straight days. It was wild. Even on day 8, I was still really, really bad. Thank you, Priestess Shakti, the Therapist. That's cute, the Therapist. Did anyone ever watch Arrested Development? The guy called David Cross was in it, and he called himself an analyst, and a therapist. So he put them both together and said, And now, anyway, um, uh, it was a very sort of funny play on words, but I probably can't say it. And I don't want to get in trouble. So anyway, the other synodic cycle I wanted to look at was April of 2018 to March of 2020. Now, what I focused on here was gun control. And so what started this whole cycle was we had the Parkland shooting, right? That was Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. And that happened on Valentine's Day, February the 14th of 2018. I mean, gosh, that was it. I think it was 17 people that were killed. It was oh gosh. I mean, I can't express enough how horrifying this was. How horrifying it was. And the young man that perpetrated this whole thing, um, was a hateful person. A lot of these mass shootings and stuff were motivated by hate and motivated by racism, white supremacy. I don't know if I could say all these words, but all these really, really nasty separative ideologies. And those of you who are interested in the occult or spirituality in general, definition of evil, according to one Tibetan master, was separation. Anything that fosters separative identity and opposition, which results in selfishness. So selfishness is sort of the expression, separation is sort of the motive. When we set ourselves apart from other people, and we all do, it's human. But when we do it in a violent way, it creates evil. I mean, we're all evil to a certain extent. We all have this, as Krishnamurti said, we all have this violence in our hearts, right? Which comes from identification. Identifying selves as a particular self or individual and identified with other particular things or identities, right? For example, I'm Frankie. I'm a trans girl. I am an astrologer. I'm a Mason. I'm in the occult and all these sorts of things. These are identifications that I have that can get me really upset or reactive to other things, because when someone hurts or denigrates or criticizes something we're identified with, they're doing it to us, aren't they? It feels like they are, but they're in reality, who are you? Another video for another time. But it's very important here because of the motivation by a lot of these active shooters, as we call them. I came from a corporate setting and we used to do active shooter drills all the time. Well, I worked at a college, a university, and we sort of treated our department as a corporation, but it wasn't. It was still a public institution. But you know how people are very fond of running public institutions like corporations in the United States, even though it doesn't work. It's why Sears went out of business. Or no, was it Sears? Yeah, Sears. Why it suffered so much. Because it got run into the ground for being run like a business. Look at Walmart. They're a planned economy and they run very, very well. Almost too well. So we had that crisis. We had this mass shooting. And almost immediately after, well, about a month after, March 23rd, at the beginning of this whole cycle, right? And again, we could say that Mars here. You know what? Let's pull up the charts. Let's pull up the charts. Let's go back some years here. So we're in March of 2018. There we go. March of 2018. And you can see here, oh gosh. Oh my gosh. I've got evil in my belly. It's coming up. Speaking of evil. So you could see Mars conjunct Saturn here. This is the beginning of the Synodic cycle. And it essentially began with the National March for Our Lives protest. March for Our Lives was, a student organization that students from Parkland started. I believe they started it. To protest guns and to promote gun control. They weren't promoting, abolition of ownership or anything like that, but they were promoting stricter laws, which many would argue was very, very reasonable. So, in fact, hundreds of thousands of people nationwide marched in protest of guns. Another thing that we saw during this period was the opioid crisis. But we won't go into that right now for lack of time. So, the waxing square, 2019. This was late January. The waxing square, right? The problems sort of manifest once again. We had a Louisiana shooter at the end of January who killed 5, including his girlfriend, her brother, father, and his own parents. This was Louisiana. That's right. Now, but this did sort of, well, right before this, I guess, January 8th, we had a Background Checks Act of 2019. I don't think it ever passed, but it was proposed. It would have prohibited the transfer of firearm ownership between private parties, right? Without a background check, so you can't just give a gun to your homie. Here you go, right? Which is very important because you're tracking the custody of these weapons. So that bill did not make it very far, which is very characteristic of the square. Facing opposition, pushing things ahead, but facing opposition. So now with the waxing trine, this is a really sad, sad example, but it does end in really substantial change, at least for New Zealand. In March of 2019, there was the Christchurch, New Zealand, mosque shootings. It involved 2 separate mosques, 1 gunman. Again, motivated by hate and racism and all this sort of stuff. He wrote a whole manifesto about the Great Replacement Theory, and you'll see a bunch of other of these active shooters that cite very similar stuff, which you'd think that people would get chastised in the media, particular media figures, for pushing these sorts of nasty things like Great Replacement Theory, So that was part of it. He killed 51 people and injured another 40. Again, he was a 28-year-old kid. I mean, you're just approaching your Saturn return. You don't know what's what, but he was a far-right racist and had this whole Great Replacement Theory manifesto. This resulted, though, in the Arms Amendment Act of 2019 in New Zealand, which prohibited the ownership of semi-automatic weapons. It resulted in a lot less violence. It's funny because we don't even realize that Canada has shootings too, So anyway, it's an example of a trine in a way because there was, forward momentum. It came at a big price. A big, big price. I can't imagine. I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine losing loved ones like that, or going through that myself, or someone I care about. So the opposition, right? This was June-ish of 2019. We were still more or less in that full Mars phase, right? Where Mars was still somewhat opposing. It wasn't a direct opposition. It wasn't the same orb or whatever, but we were more or less still in that moon phase or Mars phase, right? And what was that? Well, August 3rd was the El Paso shooting in Texas. It was at a Walmart supercenter. Again, motivated by hatred and white supremacy. The shooter had a manifesto spelling all that out. But again, it was a terrible, terrible event. And it did spark major protests all around the country, targeting the gun lobby, but also they were targeting Donald Trump himself for anti-immigrant rhetoric. So the thing about these oppositions, right, they bring what? They bring persistent issues to the surface, protracted issues, right? And so we see, again, addressing gun control, which is a persistent issue, and then the hateful rhetoric from the presidency, which was another persistent issue because it started as soon as he came into office. I mean, even before, gosh, way before, way before he even came into office. And again, this isn't political, this is just what happened. Now, how about the waning trine? Waning trine is again addressing these issues, isn't it? We're trying to address these issues. And what happened? Well, on September 12th, CEOs of 145 companies signed a joint letter, sent it to Congress to pressure them to pass gun control laws. So these companies were taking a critical look at what had happened before and were making suggestions of trying to address. It was a critique of what had happened, like we see with the waning trines, isn't it? They wanted stronger background checks and red flag laws. What are red flag laws? Well, basically, they allow law enforcement to confiscate guns from certain people who are unstable or, acting erratically or having mental health crises, for their own safety and the safety of others. Now, how about the waning square, right? This is where, new unforeseen things just pass right back up. Well, there were other major shootings at the waning square. I mean, there are major shootings at all times, but this one did result in some change. This one happened in Santa Clarita, California. I believe it was called Saugus High School. I think that's what it was called. And this resulted in stricter gun laws in the state of California. So, now what I wanted to mention, I think I already mentioned this, about the Synodic cycle before that was the Flint water crisis. And again, it's really interesting because Saturn rules lead and Mars rules bacteria and viruses and disease. And we saw those two things coalesce during that whole Flint water crisis. So it started, Obama announced the crisis before the actual conjunction happened. We were more or less in that phase in late January of 26, what was that? Late January of 2016? No, it was August of 2016. August of 2016. So before that, January was when Obama announced the crisis, and we were approaching, right, the conjunction, but then Mars went retrograde all the way heck back. So, or hell back. I think I can say hell. Hell, 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 hell. Damn you to hell. Hell. I'm on a highway to hell. Highway to hell. That's one of the good AC/DC songs. No stop sign, speed limit. Something ticket on a one-way ride. Anyway, so that's interesting because Obama announced the crisis. We were approaching the conjunction. And then, this is not a resolution at all to the crisis whatsoever, but they they had a bottled water program for Flint residents before that. They were giving them free bottled water. Well, they cut that off at the end of the Synodic cycle. So it wasn't like there was a resolution, but, it was removed. Any sort of care for the situation was just sort of removed or taken away. Now, the last Synodic cycle I wanted to talk about was in the 1930s. So it was January 17th, 1934 to January 25th, 1936. And I sort of summarized this as Hitler consolidating power and removing opposition or undesirables. Now, before that, he had already gotten rid of homosexuals and trans people. He sent us all to the first concentration camps after he opened them. But let's look at some of the other things. Well, so number one, what did I do here? What did I do here? Well, number one was Hitler coming to power, I, Well, he was appointed to the chancellery in 1933. But then, right, he started consolidating power bit by bit throughout 1934. So the waxing square happened in late May, early June. And we had the Rom affair in June of 1934. Well, late June, early July. Basically, that was Hitler ordering the murder of top Nazi militia leaders, the SA, right? The SA were sort of the Nazi militia before that. And Hitler created the SS. And he dispatched the SS to kill, right, top SA leaders. Rom, I believe his name was Rom, Rohm, or Rome. He was the main character here that was targeted, and then all of his top people as well. So that was a consolidation of power quite a bit. During the waxing trine, von Hindenburg died. So, this is sort of, we always say this is like an optimistic time, but it was optimistic for him. Von Hindenburg died, and Hitler becomes president, but then immediately abolishes the presidency and declares himself Führer, whatever that means. It means leader or guide or whatever in German, but it became a very nasty, nasty word associated with dictatorship and fascism. So that was springtime for Hitler and Germany. For those of you familiar with, what was that play? God, what was that play? Nathan Lane and, Gene Wilder, right? Gene Wilder. It was Mel Brooks, Springtime for Hitler. It was, oh wait, no, that was History of the World, Part 1. That was a joke. Oh no, but then they did a play too. What was that play? It's going to drive me nuts. It's going to drive me nuts. The producers, thank you, Denise. Thank you, the producers. Oh, I saw it. Well, I had the DVD version of the Gene Wilder one because I love Gene Wilder. Gene Wilder. There's no earthly way of knowing which direction we are going. There's no knowing where we're rowing or which way the river's flowing. Is it raining? Is it snowing? Is a hurricane a-blowing? Not a speck of light is showing, so the danger must be growing. Are the fires of hell a-glowing? Is the reaper mowing? Yes! Danger must be growing, for the rowers keep on rowing, and they're certainly not showing any sign that they are slowing. Stop the boat. Anyway, so the opposition, October of 1934. So right before that, leading up to it, which was still sort of the opposition phase, the full Mars phase, in September of 1934, there was the 6th Nazi Party Congress, the Nuremberg rallies that were famously featured in the 1935 film Triumph of the Will by Leni Riefenstahl, which was a big Nazi propaganda film that sort of asserted their dominance, right? And you may have seen that film in high school or had to have studied it or something like that. But really, it was it sort of represented the height, right, of their strength and power, or at least the way they displayed it. Now, the waning train, I said the whining train, but it's the waning trine, was August of 1935. This was another optimistic time for him. In fact, it was more of an illusory time. You could say it was misplaced optimism because he made a public speech, Hitler, warning all of his rivals that he and his evil cabal will crush them all, will crush all opposition. They were overly ambitious, but they did cause a lot of awful evil and destruction. before they were finally taken down. Now we finally reached the waning square, which was September 23rd, 1935. Around that time, the Nuremberg laws were enacted, which prohibited Jews from being citizens, from having relations with non-Jews, and Jews were not allowed to employ non-Jews. So basically, it removed their citizenship. But then, 1936. We had the 1936 Berlin Games, right? The Olympics were there. And what happened? Now, this wasn't a solution to Nazism, obviously. This was just one little cycle. And there were other synodic cycles. But this is interesting to me because it had to do with sort of Hitler's consolidation. Now, in the 1936 Games, an American, a black American, and why can't I remember his name? A black American, uh, Berlin Games, 1936. Jesse Owens, was that his name? I believe it was, Jesse Owens, that's right. I remembered it right as I was looking it up. Jesse Owens, right? He won, I think, 3 gold medals. And that really wasn't all that, Hitler didn't enjoy that. Hitler was not happy about a black man winning 3 gold medals at a Nazi Olympics, which in a way, it did represent a positive view towards the future, right? It subverted their ideology a little bit about how they were a master race and all this sort of nonsense, which we know in retrospect was nonsense, although a lot of people don't seem to know. So that's why we're talking about all this sort of stuff. So the reason why I wanted to talk about all this is because we're about to have a waxing trine, which is a more optimistic period, right? Now, this period started in April of 2022. And I don't think we'll see the outline of what this all represents until we reach the end. But let's keep our eyes peeled for what happens towards the end of this month, and the beginning of next month, because we could see positive developments. We could see peace talks, right? There have been talks about peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. We could see stricter gun laws come up, because that's been another thing that's been going on. We could also see a relief of suffering in some way when it comes to disease, confinement, prison, stuff like that. Very Saturnian type of themes. So hopefully what we've noticed here throughout this Saturn Mars synodic cycle, this Saturn Mars phases, if you will, is that we see a particular crisis emerge at the beginning of each of these. And we see how that crisis progresses. Often that crisis will have themes related to the significations of those 2 planets. Like we saw, violence, disease, exile, confinement, restriction, right? And these laws, right, they're sort of restrictions or regulations. They might be positive or have positive effects, but you can still see the Saturnian influence, right? The structure involved. But we see most of those happen when it comes to the trines, don't we? So, and I'm sure we'll still face terrible opposition. Now, thank you for being so patient. Whoever would like to put their birth info up can have their chart looked at with regards to all this fun stuff. So otherwise, we'll keep talking. If no one puts their birth info up, I'll start going through history. So, is anyone even here still? I don't know. 'Cause you can drag me through hell if it meant I could hold your hand. Oops. See, I hope no one saw my, like, there's YouTubers who get caught with, like, porn or whatever on their desktop when they're streaming or moving around. Like, there was one dude who got caught with, like, deep fake. I can't say the P word, can I? Can I say the P word? I don't know. I hope I don't get in trouble. Does anyone want to put their birth info down? I guess not. So I will keep talking then. I will keep talking. I missed a couple people last night, so I wanted to give them an opportunity, to have their stuff read. So have your palms painted red. So let me pull back up this chart because I wanted to see a couple of things. I wanted to see a couple of other things. Well, I'm waiting for some of you to put your stuff in the chat. Your stuff in the chat. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. But some other things I wanted to... What else happened here? What happened? What happened in 2020? What happened? Was there anything interesting peace-wise that happened in 2020? Well, let's see. Let's pull up. Let's see. April of 2020. Did anyone ever used to watch that news show 2020 with Barbara Walters? Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs. No one remembers that. How would anyone remember 2020? No one's watched 2020 since the 90s, probably. Oh, let's see here. See here. Oh, Katrina. La Mesa, California. I'm from San Diego County. I know La Mesa. I think I said that last time to you. Oh, you loved learning today? Well, I'm glad. I mean, there's always more I could say, but I'm going to look at your chart then. And I'm going to do more videos about this stuff. I just prefer going live. I hate editing. I really do. Oh, I really do. Oh, these are people from last night. They put their stuff up publicly, so it doesn't really matter. Well, I can drag me through hell. That man, I could hold your hand. Okay, so we've got Katrina. Sorry, I have to be weird. I can't just be normal. I can't just say things. 1992. What was I doing in 92? My dad was in Desert Storm in 1992. I guess he was home perhaps by then. December 10th, 1992, 10:51 p.m. La Mesa. That means the Mesa. I just remember Chris Farley back in the day on Saturday Night Live, and he's like, El Nino, which means the Nino. Sorry, my stepmom was Mexican, and my dad would try and speak Spanish to her, which was really bad. And he would go around trying to practice his Spanish. And one time we were in a Japanese restaurant, and the waiter was Japanese, and he says, Yo quiero una más cerveza, por favor. I'm like, dude, he's Japanese. He might speak Spanish, I don't know, but it really isn't great decorum necessarily. So anyway, here's Katrina. So you can drag me through hell. If it meant I could hold your hand, I will follow you, 'cause I'm under your spell. And you can hold me to the flames, or throw me to the flames. I will follow you. So Virgo rising. Lovely. Lovely Virgo rising. I love Virgo risings. I've been in love with a Virgo rising person. So anyway, well, you have your first house ruler in Scorpio conjunct Pluto. That's always fun. That's lovely, lovely. When I think of Mercury conjunct Pluto, I think of, very forceful debaters. Who else has Mercury conjunct Pluto? You know what? You can look that stuff up here. But I remember, I think it was my mama, Marianne Williamson. My mommy, Marianne. It's a loose conjunction, but she's got Mercury conjunct Pluto as well. And Mercury moves relatively fast, but you think of the breath that blasts. It's people who can be forceful and domineering with their words. And I really hope that she can be forceful and domineering with her words because, she's going to be facing tremendous opposition. And people are going to be talking mad-ish about her. I think I can say mad shit about her. They're already calling her all sorts of names and like, she's all into tarot cards and stuff like that or whatever. But she sticks up for the poor, the working class, minorities, the LGBT community, people of color, oppressed nationalities. So, I think it's worth giving her a gander. But I would expect you to be, kudos for trying that. That's cute. Well, thank you. Mercury conjunct Pluto, though, it can be very direct. It can be almost hurtful with words. It asserts its will through words, which is sort of a wonderful thing in the right context because you can be a wonderful debater. But on the other hand, I love you, that story. My dad does that with my mom, who's Mexican also. Yeah, it's really funny. Irish and Mexicans go together like peanut butter and jelly. We're all Catholic. And historically, during that whole Alamo thing, gosh, see, look at my hair. Ugh. During that whole Alamo thing, a lot of the Irish actually went to the Mexican army to help them because they were Catholic. So, during the Spanish-American War, right? Wait, no, not the Spanish-American, the Mexican-American War. The Alamo thing, right? So anyway. It's such a weird story. I won't get into all that right now. But anyway, so it's quite interesting that the ruler of your rising sign is conjunct Pluto, and then in the third house of communication and all that. So communication, writing, speaking, all that sort of stuff, expression, factors in heavy to how your life unfolds. Soul purpose, as they would say in esoteric astrology. Soul purpose. Whatever that means. I prefer to use the word consciousness. So, but see, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Now let's talk about some timing stuff. Timing stuff. Oh, Cancer moon. Well, you're having your Mars return right now. Oh, shit. I just wiped my eye makeup. Anyway. Well, I'll have to clean it up before I go live on the Naughty platform next. So, and that's always fun. I have a lot of fun doing that. It builds confidence in lots of ways, especially when everyone's telling you, but it's fun too, and it becomes like a parasocial relationship with people, and and you get to pump people up. Not just pump people up, but you get to make people feel better about themselves. And a lot of people are very sad on those platforms, And it's nice to give them some encouragement. I'm sure there's awful people on there too, but I don't know. So some timing stuff. Well, Saturn just entered your 7th house. And that's going to be an interesting thing for a while because it can strain relationships. You probably got quite independent while you were, between March of 2020 and now, right? March of this year, the beginning of March 7th. And you could have seen responsibility sort of take over your life, like having to manage things, having to get things done, taking care of business, all that sort of stuff. And usually the reward by the end of that Saturn-Pisces transit is being better equipped to handle responsibility. But it creates a certain amount of independence in us. And that can strain relationships, because all of a sudden we start thinking like, oh, are they just my roommate? Who did I marry? Now, if you're not betrothed or with someone, you can see other relationships get strained in general, because you have this wall put up, like, I'll do it myself. Excuse me, for those of you familiar with Star Wars, Darth Vader says, I'll do it myself. It's sort of that kind of thing. It's not necessarily isolating. It's just you have to learn to relate to people again, or how to relate to people again. Like Ozzy Osbourne or Black Sabbath, right? Crazy Train. Gotta learn how to love. But you gotta relearn how to love. Crazy. But that's how it goes. Millions of people living, whoa. Whatever I don't know what he says. I just whoa. Anyway, so that's a quite interesting thing. But you're going to have this next eclipse in your 8th house, right? The eclipses were in your 9th and 3rd house before. Oh, I'm the best? Why, thank you. I am the best. I am. And I'm not just saying that. It's just true. It's factual. It's science. 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 This is science. And this shit says I'm the best. Sorry. Anyway. No, I'm not the best. I'm one of the best, but not the best. Just one of them. No, and it's just all this stuff I've been through. All this shit I've been through makes me way more of an effective astrologer than all the stuff I've learned. I mean, it's all really. And then, history, being interested in history too. So anyway, but that eclipse is going to go into your 8th house, which could alleviate a financial burden in some way, right? If there was a big loss that you had suffered before, you might get some help with it, right? It could help with, I don't know, tax stuff. It could help with debts in some way, paying things off. It could be any number of things. Even I've seen people who are going to declare bankruptcy, which actually can be a very positive thing in some instances. I've had clients declare bankruptcy, during some of these positive 8th house transits. And I do expect this to be positive. And then in October, your own personal finances will be highlighted. This could have something to do with, a raise, getting a new job, your small business if you have one. It's about your livelihood. It would be big beginnings and endings in terms of your livelihood. So, is anyone else putting their birth info up, or is this it? Is this everything? Because otherwise I'll start talking about other things after I talk about Katrina here. I don't even know if anyone's still here. I can't even tell. No one's saying anything except for Katrina. Katrina. Well, and I mean, anyone can be watching this and get some hints, especially Virgo risings, and learn things too. Oh, Elizabeth Sindelar, Madison, Wisconsin. Well, that's lovely. Thank you, Elizabeth. It's lovely to see you. It's very lovely to see you. Hopefully you got to see some of our Mars-Saturn discussion. I thought it was interesting. Hopefully you think it's interesting. Anyway, so Mars is about to enter Katrina's, or did already, sorry. Mars entered Katrina's 11th house, which can be quarrels with friends. Mars is probably pretty close to being conjunct your moon right now. I guess we could, no, I'm not going to worry about that. I was going to do a bi-wheel. I guess we could do a bi-wheel. View bi-wheel. Let's bi-wheel. I'm a bi-wheel. What does that mean? What does that even mean? So yeah, you see Mars is 0 degrees Cancer. It'll be approaching a conjunction with your moon. But this will feel a bit, just watch getting in quarrels with friends. You might have the desire to cut people off, or you might feel like other people cut you off. It's not isolating necessarily like the 12th house, but it definitely can be. It can be lonesome-ish, or it necessarily lonesome, but it can be sort of depressing because, we love our friends. And then quarrels or conflicts happen. typically. Or it feels like we don't have, we lose our optimism. We lose our sense of hope oftentimes. We get very pessimistic. But don't worry, it's not a long transit. It's just that Mars falls here. Now, with Mars in Cancer natally, you might need to work on expressing anger. You might need to, you might feel uncomfortable telling people how you really feel, And oftentimes, Mars needs to let off steam. And Mars in Cancer can let things build up, right? And then you get resentful. And when resentment builds up, eventually you explode either into tears or something else. So. Jupiter is going to be entering, well, Venus is already in your ninth house, which is lovely, lovely, especially because you have a night chart. Excuse me. Excuse me. But Jupiter's about to enter your ninth house, which is very wonderful for spiritual pursuits, for learning new things, for getting acquainted with different philosophies, religions, or points of view. Maybe you find a mentor. Maybe you find someone, a YouTuber, or, find someone who's disseminating some sort of information to you that, you're just now learning or integrating. We learn about new philosophies, new ways of thinking, new ways of approaching things. Our politics or worldview might even change. So that's an interesting transit for you. I guess we talked about all of those. Well, you got Mars here and Saturn here. Saturn's in your 7th house and Mars is in your 11th house. Right? So again, it's highlighting the relationship thing, but this could be sort of a more, an optimistic type relationship thing where you notice you reconcile perhaps with someone, or you notice that you probably shouldn't have cut someone off like that, or they shouldn't have cut you off, right? Or perhaps you just look forward, right? And you meet new people rather than just cutting old ones off. So, I mean, this is more of an optimistic thing, or maybe it's just that you're like, you know what? I want y'all to leave me alone right now. I'm cool. I'm fine. I'm just going to be over here. That's another thing that could happen with that, So let's do the next. 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 You typically watch on Facebook. Oh, please, yeah, come here. Facebook dropped me like a ton of bricks. They're really nasty, and I tried writing to them, like, what happened, And they just sent me a bunch of automatic emails back, automated emails, I really, really wasn't happy with them. I was counting on, like, I'm, trying to make this all work and make ends meet. And I lost my Facebook revenue for some reason, and they wouldn't tell me why. I think it's probably because I advertised my adult content. So, anyway, Elizabeth. Yeah, I'm not going live so much on Facebook anymore because there's no point. There's no point. There's no point to going live on Facebook because there's nothing in it for me. And I can't just do everything out of the goodness of my heart because I have a kid. And I need to eat and pay rent. So, now, 3:15. Beware the Ides of March. I wonder if anyone says that. I mean, I'm sure everyone says that to you. Beware the Ides of March. I'm sure everyone says that to you, don't they? Don't they, Elizabeth? Don't they? And I hope I convinced you to come here because this is where it's at. I even thought about doing Twitch because I hate editing videos and I love being live. I much prefer being live. I'm a total ham. I'm horrible. Elizabeth. Oh, Liz. Beware the Ides of March. Oh, look, you're almost a new moon baby, speaking of synodic cycles. I mean, for all intents and purposes. I mean, I guess you could say balsamic. Balsamic, but approaching the new moon, you know. So there is probably the sense of, a little bit of sense of darkness, but when we're approaching the new moon also, there's a sense of innocence and of naivety. So I don't know if that's something that resonates with you. I always make fun of the word resonate because I'm a musician, and there's a type of guitar we call resonators. And people are like, oh, that doesn't resonate with me. I'm like, well, yeah, you're not a guitar. I mean, it's a stupid joke, but you feel me. So anyway, there's a certain amount of innocence with this, right? Or naivety. So I don't know if you have the experience of perhaps people taking advantage of you or whatever. I mean, I'm sort of naive myself, but I had an ex who used to say, you're way too trusting and you're way too naive. And I'm like, well, that's the world I would prefer to live in, I don't want to be suspicious all the time of people. Gosh, why does that look so bad? Jiminy Christmas. Maybe it's just this angle. I was watching, oh, it's Donald Trump. And I'm like all of his hair is combed forward. So I wonder if he was ever to put it like the right way, if he would, have this giant, what do you call it? Like bald mullet? It's like a mullet thing. Like where, there's party in the back, but there's nothing on top. Not even business. And I shouldn't. That's bad karma, right? There, but for the grace of God go I, right? So anyway, it's a lovely placement, but then, you're having your Venus return right now, aren't you? Where Venus is going through Taurus, which is your 12th house. It can be not the funnest in the world. Excuse me. Again, it can be sort of isolating. And you may have some issues with that anyway, You might be a bit socially awkward, perhaps. Maybe you have depression. Maybe you've had to struggle with alcohol or drugs or something, but maybe a sense of exile or being left out. Oh, excuse me. Definitely a sense of exile, probably. Being alone, lonesome, loneliness, perhaps. 12th house stuff. Saturn in your 4th house in retrograde. So usually that's an absent or abusive father growing up. It's usually almost always an unstable household as a child. So I'm sorry about that. Gemini rising is, can be so good. It can relate to lots of different people. It can be very inclusive. There's also, assholes who are Gemini rising, of course, but it has that potential. And your first house ruler is in the 10th house, which is very auspicious and is conjunct the moon, So something about your openness and your vulnerability shines through. People enjoy that about you. Now, Mercury isn't happy. Mercury, the ruler of Gemini in your first house, the ruler of your first house, Gemini, retrograde, and what's called in fall and detriment, because he rules and is exalted. And oh, look, my head disappears. Look at that. This is how you get ahead in life. Sorry. My dad was in the military, and he had this is violent. I shouldn't tell this story, but a car bomb went off outside of his hotel when he was in India. I forget where he was, but he took a picture of the paramedics carrying away a man's head. And we were doing a slideshow, or he was doing a slideshow rather, when I was young and he got back from this trip he was on for the military. And Catholic parents, friends with priests. We had a priest friend named Father Hans who was over. And my dad's doing his slideshow. And that picture comes up. And everyone's like, and my dad very cavalierly says, "You see, Father, this is how you get ahead in life." So anyway, he had a sixth sense of humor. Scorpio moon. That's where I got my humor. So anyway, Mercury is very difficult here. So it may feel like you haven't had a lot of life direction, or maybe you feel like I don't know what I'm supposed to do, or waffling around. Now, this makes communication quite difficult, and that should be one of your strong suits, but you have to fight through it, because you see, Mercury in Pisces, it has a difficult time articulating things. It can see in its head what it wants to say, but like Eminem, the words won't come out. Something over pow, the words won't come out. Mom, spaghetti, spaghetti, spaghetti. The vomit on its sweater already. Anyway, but you feel what I'm saying. The words won't come out. You see it in your head. So that can be a difficult thing. You're probably very imaginative too, or artistic in some way. Poetic, perhaps. But anyway, Saturn entered your 10th house, didn't he? So don't, you can't get hopeless during this transit because that's the tendency. We get very sort of hopeless and we start lamenting our situation, right? Aspirations, desires, promotions, things like that we wanted, they sort of fall through our fingers, right? But what we don't see oftentimes is that other opportunities present themselves. So what happens during this transit is oftentimes our life direction totally changes. And we don't see it when we're in the thick of it, do we? So, no, we don't. We don't see it when we're in the thick of it. Anyway. But what does become apparent towards the end, oftentimes we see light at the end of the tunnel, at the last 10 degrees of a Saturn going through a sign. And we'll start finding a new direction or new opportunities or a new job or something comes up. I think I always tell this story, but I went from not getting a promotion that I was really, really upset about to getting a whole nother promotion that I never expected, right? I got out of the restaurant stuff and I went to a systems analyst job, which I'd never expected. Thought I was going to be stuck in food service forever. But it was sort of a new opportunity. So, don't lose hope. Remember that there's light at the end of the tunnel in 2025. So, for all of us, whatever, Saturn's always somewhere in our charts. It's not like Saturn disappeared. He's always somewhere. So the eclipses went from your 6th and 12th house, which is very, it's like the cocoon that we're in, where we try to assimilate all these major existential changes that we've gone through. For you, it would have been 2021-ish, when you would have had the eclipses in your 1st house, probably, or your 7th house. You may have seen big endings with relationships, too, in 2021. But then here in 2022, it was about crawling into your cocoon and removing yourself from the world so you could assimilate these new experiences about yourself or changes that you've been feeling inside. And now you're emerging into the light of day in the 11th house, the hopeful place. And you're having this wonderful, hopeful Jupiterian eclipse in your 11th house. So it should represent luck when it comes to people who help you out and who respect what you do. That's why we see friends in the 11th house, because it's people who support us and support our goals and our aspirations, right? Benefactors, that sort of stuff. So this is a wonderful eclipse for you. And then it'll go to your 5th house. It'll actually be conjunct your Pluto in your 5th house. So if you have children, it could be a good omen for children or something like that, hopefully. The 5th house is also sex and pleasure, the things we enjoy doing. So I expect that to be mostly a good eclipse too for you. Maybe you start learning to have fun again. Because I imagine during 2021, sorry, during 2022, you didn't know what fun was. Everything was just, you know, uh, reflection, crisis. What does it all mean? Processing trauma, all that fun stuff. So, yeah, so just be aware of that. Now, Jupiter's going to go through your 12th house next in May. And that could sort of alleviate that sense of isolation a little bit. You see? Well, Jupiter will start cleaning that stuff up for you a little bit, or at least making it a little bit more optimistic. Right? So going through your 12th house, you could see the resolution of a mental health situation. I mean, nothing's ever totally resolved, but starting a new treatment, having a new doctor, new medication, something positive in that way. I mean, there's all sorts of ways it could manifest. I'm just thinking of some off the top of my head. Um, Sorry, what was next? Oh, Mars. Mars in your second house. Watch out spending money, my darling. Mars transiting our second house burns a hole in our pockets. So keep your money safe and beware the Ides of March. Right? Noble Brutus. Caesar is an ambitious man. So I love Shakespeare. I really do. There's all these conspiracy theories about Shakespeare, I mean, some of it might be, I don't know. There's a whole theory that he didn't even exist, that it was a group of people who wrote all those plays and stuff. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'd rather think Shakespeare is a person, I guess. I don't know. I don't even care, to be honest with you. I just love the literature. I love Hamlet. And Romeo and Juliet's one of my favorites. I used to always say, I am fortune's fool, which is what Romeo says. And if you think about astrology, that's sort of a theme, isn't it? Being fortune's fool. We have very little control over anything. The one thing we do have control over is the ability to direct our attention. But that's something for another day. So what else is going on in your chart right now? Besides Mars burning a hole in your pocket. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. We talked about Saturn. We talked about Jupiter. We talked about Mars. I guess, Saturn is in Pisces, your 10th house, and Mars is in your 2nd house. Excuse me. Saturn rules your 9th and your 8th. And Mars rules your 6th. Excuse me. Your 6th. And where the hell is Aries? Where'd you go? Oh, 11th house. Duh. And Mars rules your 11th. So again, this could be highlighting the friendship issues and getting help from people. So as I was saying earlier, if you had Jupiter's been going through your 11th house since Christmas. So you've already been probably feeling some of that optimism, Now when Jupiter goes into your 12th house, I mean, yeah, it's a healing type of thing. But it's also, we understand, we start to appreciate the healing of isolation or of, what's the word? Seclusion? Isolation? There's a solitude. That's the word I was looking for. There's a healing nature about solitude. And Jupiter going through the 12th house could be that. I need healing time for me. You're all cool. Stay out there. Because I'm going in here. You feel me? You feel me? Yeah, Mars conjunct Jupiter too. I have Mars opposite Jupiter. We can be sort of pompous. We can be full of hot air. We are always right. We can be a little enthusiastic or dare I say zealous or fanatic about things. So just something to be aware of. But we definitely get pompous. And we definitely, well, I know. And I know I do that. And so I can laugh about it a little bit. And hopefully I start doing that less and less as time goes on. Because that can affect relationships and all that. But our tendency. You have a similar tendency. Let's see if anyone else has said anything. As you can drag me through hell. Your hand. Oh, wait, you're talking about Facebook? You said you're sorry to hear that. They give you a notification every time you post? Well, yeah, no, that's good. I'm talking about my video. They used to pay me and they don't pay me anymore. You know? So, and I don't know why they did that and they won't tell me why. And that was really helping me with rent. So I have to keep, in order to keep this all afloat, I have to maintain a bunch of revenue streams, which is why I also do naughty content. But, oh, you love my politics and sing along with me often. I try not to, alienate people, but I will alienate people because I have to stand for something. What side am I on? I'm on the side of the weak. I'm on the side of the oppressed. I'm on the side of the vulnerable. I'm on the side of the destitute. Those are the people I care about. The strong and the wealthy, they have their shit. They can go and F off, right? Your divorce was finalized in 2021. Well, that would be quite fitting because that was probably around the eclipse that happened in your 7th house. So that would make perfect sense. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm slowly gonna stop doing lives on Facebook because it just doesn't help, and I need to build up stuff on here. You know, I even thought about going to Twitch. But anyway, well, what else? What else is going on here? Talked about Saturn. We talked about Venus. We talked about Jupiter. We talked about Mars. Anyone we missed? I mean, I haven't mentioned much about Mercury. Oh, you know what? You have your sun opposite Saturn. It's a tough kettle of fish, isn't it? You probably have resting bitch face, I mean, you're with a Pisces and a Pisces moon, Pisces sun and a Pisces moon. I make fun of the Pisces suns and moons. It's like being a mop. A dirty mop. It's like you soak up all the dirt and sludge and stuff all around you that other people leave around. There's only one major difference. You can wring out a mop. I always love that joke. But seriously, you're going to have to take alone time for yourself every day. And that you probably need some healthy isolation because you can probably feel other people's nonsense. And it's not conscious. I hate the word empath because it's something that narcissists use to justify interfering in people's lives. And, that's not what this is at all, I think of this, empathy is a thing. We become unconsciously identified or aware of other people's pain and suffering, right? Compassion is more conscious to me, though, because compassion demands that we do things, right? That we be of service. But sometimes service means not doing anything. Sometimes compassion means not doing anything. Well, why is that? Because sometimes you interfering would cause more trouble. And sometimes that there's nothing you can contribute. So you have to sit there and stew in your pain and suffering about the situation, right? Anyway, so that just means you should take alone time for yourself every day to extricate your own thoughts, feelings, and emotions from other people's, because other people's moods probably affect you. Snooze. That was my alarm to move on to my other live. But just to finish these thoughts here, well, first of all, having the moon and sun up there in the 10th house is very good for visibility, and it's very auspicious for for some types of success, even though you've probably had a hard go. Like you've had to struggle a lot with Saturn opposite the sun and with an ill-dignified. And what do I mean by that? I mean, Mercury's not happy in Pisces. And then Mercury's retrograde, which means Mercury doesn't do any good stuff till you get older. You know? So, well, and you probably had a rough time with dad. I mean, I already said because Saturn in the fourth house, but then Mercury rules the fourth house also, because he rules Gemini and Virgo. And then he's retrograde in Pisces in the 10th house. So dad may have been like a big man on campus type, and or maybe his stuff was just way more important. He was way more consumed with his own success and whatever. I don't know. But you would have some opportunities for success yourself. I mean, nothing I would put in a novel or, not saying you're going to be famous or big or anything like that. It's just being able to have your situation ease up as you get older, So, and it's very interesting because Mercury is also speaking, writing, and communication. It's how we think. And Mercury rules your first house, right? And then the sun rules the third house and is placed in the 10th. So I would imagine something to do with writing and speaking, media, or communications would be right up your alley, advertising even maybe, or marketing. Something where you have you have to do clever communication, but this is not your default setting because you don't like to speak up, right? You don't like to be noticed. You probably hide your light under a bushel, something like that, because Venus in the 12th house. Well, you probably go back and forth. It's like, I'm shy, but I'm not shy. So anyway. But Saturn opposite the sun. You probably roll your eyes when the rest of us complain, don't you? Like Sisyphus pushing the ball up the hill in hell. It's a bit like that. So. Did I miss any big transits? I don't think so. Oh, everything's in. I don't think so. Anyone remember Bush? Gavin Rosedale? He was sexy, wasn't he? I mean, he probably still is. He was married to Gwen Stefani, Because I ain't no holler back girl. I used to love that song. It came out when I was in 7th grade. I'm just a girl in the world. Oh, I'm just a girl, just a little old me. I love that song. I used to sing it, and then people would see me singing it and be like, oh, don't watch me singing that. I don't want anyone to know how I feel inside. Anyway, well, if there are no further questions, I'm planning on going live tomorrow too, but maybe we'll just do that. Maybe I'll make that the financial thing, because I have a script more or less done up about financial crises. But again, to my international friends, I did focus on the United States. I'm sorry. But as you know, being the dominant hegemonic power since World War II, a lot of these financial crises that did involve, even 1929, before World War II, involved a United States stock market crash. So it is all important stuff. And I'm not trying to be Americocentric necessarily. I'm trying to include our international friends. But there are, American issues that have international ramifications. So we'll talk about that stuff. And please bring birth info, whoever. And hopefully people watch this stuff, because there's a lot of good information here. And I spent a lot of time on it, I spent a lot of time. Anyway, I do love you very much. Please make sure you go to my Patreon if you can. Watch my other videos, please. Not just the lives, but there's some other fun videos too. I just hate editing. And then I'll probably see you tomorrow if you would like to come. I'm planning on going live 3 times a week. I might go down to 2, to write a more of a script. or whatever. So, but so far, I'm going to keep doing 3 for now. Anyway, I love you very much. Thank you for staying around and hanging out. And I'll see you tomorrow. And have a wonderful whatever you're having.